Hey everyone, 5th edition was finally released in a complete set with its player's handbook, monster manual, and Dungeon Master's Guide, and I'd like to talk about it. But before I can do that, we need to go through a brief overview of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, Dungeons & Dragons has spanned many different editions with many different attempts at creating new concepts and ideas. However, we're not going to focus on basic D&D, but rather advanced Dungeons & Dragons, as I feel it's the most popular type. What Gary Gygax initially attempted to create was a way to turn miniatures into fully fledged individual characters, and what he ended up creating was a very sophisticated and complex game where rules exist for nearly every action and imaginable creation, thanks to Tolkien. In all of it, just all of it. Just crazy. Just craziness. And what it ended up being is a very convoluted and complex system with many flaws put into it. And with the supplementation of Dragon Magazine, many of these many of these rules were fixed. However, there's big gaping effects, very specific pieces of the rules that remain, well, problematic. Core parts of the rules that cannot be fixed. One of the biggest one of these is being Thaco. Thaco being a very static object in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And while I haven't played very much of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, First Edition, it's for good reasons. I feel that Second Edition is much better when it's fully put together as a product. However, this isn't to say that First Edition doesn't have its merits. After all, there's many diehards out there who claim that First Edition's better than Second Edition. I just feel that with the advanced proficiency system and the way that Thaco individually stacks with levels rather than being a single table abstract concept, works much better to Dungeons & Dragons' original envisionment of tabletop miniature individualization. Man, do I really say and make up random words while I'm this drunk? Fuck me. However, something someone cannot say about First Edition is that it was limited. This edition featured many expansions to it. If it wasn't Dragon Magazine, it was hundreds of new ideas and concepts introduced through dozens of new books. As you can see through here, this is where Displacer Beasts were first introduced, Ifrit, many different devil and demon concepts, elementals, and this is just the first Monsters Manual. And they released a second one, and they released a Fiend Folio. The Fiend Folio being where they introduce extraplanar creatures and things that break a little more than our normalcy when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons. Right here you can see the inspiration for Drizzt Do'Urden's world, Orloth, with the Dark Elves. And you can also see, right here's the devil himself, removed in Second Edition due to Christianic intervention. Another addition to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was Unearthed Arcana, a mythical 4th rule book. Something that didn't really contain much in my opinion, but it did have the comeliness system and a few more spells, and it also delved deeper into how to use cantrips in better ways. As you can see here, these are my notes on how to go and use comeliness. I really enjoyed it because it just adds an extra layer of hardcore flavor to the game. And here you can see how they expand on race limitations along with sub-races. So, there's the Barbarian, something you'd have to go and get a handbook for in Second Edition. So this book comes up with a much more in-depth look at spells and classes, along with how to expand character creation. Overall, I think it's a good edition, and if you do plan on playing Second Edition, you should at least do it for comeliness and the bonus spells. Now, Second Edition was far from perfect, even though it consolidated all the rules of First Edition and the Dragon magazines into 3 core handbooks, which they also kind of use a binder for, and
I gave that binder to my brother because he really wanted to play it, and he hated that fucking binder. So in the end, everyone's up buying the Monster Manual, the complete one. I think it has everything that was ever released in that stupid, in the stupid binder. So I think that second edition's the superior version. Just by the way, it tries to consolidate everything, tries to make everything feel more solid, and less of a first attempt. It really tries to clarify the rules, and by the way, it modifies THAC0 and individual classes, and also raises race limitations. It makes it feel like your character isn't stuck in a single fucking thing. Although, I can see where Gygax really wanted to attempt to keep authentic Tolkien lore with elves only being able to reach so high of a level, because then they just lose interest, and also they live for millions of years. Not really, like more like centuries. But if they live for too long, then they'll become super powerful. Stuff that required a lot of thought, but in the average D&D game doesn't really come into play. I mean, after all, elves live for, 7 centuries. And while, they could reach level 20, they don't because they're lazy. But a human could. I don't buy it too much. It's the reason why in 3rd edition they changed all that.
However, 2nd edition is my go-to edition for Dungeons & Dragons. The grittiness it presents, and the absolute horror of having your ass handed to you by a house cat can only be encapsulated by these complex rules. Things that are so silly and strange, like only being able to go and become a necromancer if you're human, or only a gnome or a human can be an illusionist. Things like this, very specific rules. Or perhaps, if that doesn't tickle your fancy, you should go and look at what it requires to be a paladin. Something insanely hard to do. I mean, you have to have a flippin', let's see here, 12 strength, 9 constitution, 13 wisdom, and 17 charisma. And if your strength and charisma are above 16, which charisma obviously has to be, you get that mythical 10% experience bonus. However, this is a very hard thing to become. I mean, you only roll 3d10 or 3d6s to choose your stats, though we came up with multiple ways to get around that with, I think, the most common way to play 4d6 minus the lowest dice. And even that gets pretty hard to get that charisma. And only humans can become paladins. Along with that is the advent of dual versus multi-classing, and the optional proficiency system becoming a full-blown chapter in the book. Now, I'm a huge fan of the proficiency system, and I mean, it doesn't cover everything, but you can find some PDFs online that do literally cover everything, from like butchering to just everything. I mean, just everything. Just think about it. So, you'd have to come up with your own way about how proficiencies eventually evolved into skills, but I really enjoyed this system a lot, especially when it came to being a fighter with a specialist. Special, whatever it's called. What is that called? Specialization. Here it is. Not only that, but a lot of these optional rules in here, such as negative hit points and group initiative, as well as encumbrance and weapon speed, all those things really added to the complexity to make it feel like your character was really unique. I always incorporated weapon speed into my initiative just because it made it feel like your weapon choice actually mattered. And, let's see here. Here we go. Character death. Character death felt a lot more lethal in this game. My uncle and I would always incorporate the rule that if you fell below 0 hit points and were ever to rise above it, you had to succeed on system shock or die. This was a surefire way to make sure no one took unnecessary risks, though it also cemented my uncle's dominance as the only cleric. Now, I honestly don't remember much about the Dungeon Master's Guide, besides it has the treasure tables in it and a whole bunch of optional rules, but I do remember that the first edition did a much better job at making you be able to create your own labyrinths and dungeons and castles, with a lot of random tables talking about buttresses and staunches and all these other cool things, and this one more just being about like the core experience of the game and how to handle doling out magic items, experience, and cash. But I never really found myself using this except for this one table here. This flippin' table is such giant handy, you wouldn't believe. And it's such a big fucking hassle to go and find and dig up every single time. Page 92, if you can see it. Oh, gotta wait for the camera. Gotta wait for the camera. 92. Page 92 on the new Dungeon Master's Guide. I don't have the old one, sorry, purists. But it became such a giant hassle that they actually put it in to the Dungeon Master screen. This is really all you need to go and have a fun time playing D&D besides those treasure charts. This has everything from the saves you need, morale, THAC0 for, I don't know, random ass shit, like if you don't know how warriors progress in THAC0, armor saving throws, magic saving throws. In fact, I found my uncle often turning towards the saving throw section of magic items and regular items to see if our shit broke at any point in time. All the time, we would find our shit just exploding in our pockets. And if it was a potion, you better believe if we didn't drink it because it was a healing potion, it was just a fucking disaster. Your pants melt off, it's a fireball, something stupid. And also, a good optional rule I liked was weapon type versus armor. It made it feel more like the Conan 3.5 or role-playing game than anything else. And finally, out of the core books of 2nd edition, we have the Monster Manual, or Monstrous Manual. This was a consolidation of all of those leaf paper things you shoved into that horrible binder, and it does a really good job. It adds everything from almost every campaign setting made before its publishing. So you can see that they also had things like, let's see, Spelljammers and Dark Sun put in here, as well as Ravenloft. Lots of good creatures and that kind of shit. They also go deep into how these things exist and how they maneuver during combat. So you actually want to read these things before you just randomly decide to roll them up and then throw them at people. I always found this to be a great read. I mean, right here, look at this ogre. This thing is clearly the Ogre Magi, and it's got a ton of oriental flair to it. It even says, the Oriental Ogre has light blue, light green, or pale brown skin. So you can see that they really dug deep. And Oriental Adventures was actually one of my favorite campaign settings for this. Although the book I currently have is just like ruined to shit. Oh yeah.
So as you can see, 2nd edition had a lot to offer, especially to someone like me who didn't really consider 1st edition that much of a must-have. I mean, I got it mostly as a collector thing, and the fact that my uncle gave me all of his books. Uncle John, not Uncle Christian. Uncle Christian loves his 2nd edition books, and God bless him, he's the one who got me into all of this. Though, Uncle John definitely was more of a collector. So with all that being said, let's look into more of the supplemental things for 2nd and 1st edition, because they're both technically, and I keep winking a lot, they're both technically compatible with each other. I mean, you just have to go edit out some odds and ends stuff about proficiencies, but in all honesty, they're the same game. One just uses individual tables for character classes, and one uses a static table, and there's proficiencies. Oh, and 2nd edition cut out Assassin, Half-Orc, and Monk, which will make a return in the following books. I thought I pushed the button.
2nd edition saw a massive amount of supplemental books. I sought to just get the core races along with, of course, the Book of Humanoids. That's where your half-orcs come from. Arms and equipment to go and cover